It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is David Harrison from the Locked On Commanders podcast, and this episode is brought to you by US Cellular. At US Cellular, they know phones are great, but they're not always great for us. Sure, they connect us to so much, but they also distract us from, well, us. The us that actually laughs out loud with each other instead of just texting it, that knows being in the same room doesn't always mean being together. So let's find us again by putting our phones down for 5 days, 5 hours, even 5 minutes. Join US Cellular in the Phones Down for 5 challenge. Find out more at uscellular.com/find us.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to your source for fantasy hockey news and degenerate gambling breakdowns. It's a Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast, Hump Day edition, one where we are breaking down some big-time injuries from across the league, a little Who Would You Rather segment, wrapping it up with the bets. Let's get right to it. Thank you for joining us.
Your Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Can you hear it, people? You can almost taste it. The playoffs, the fantasy playoffs are upon us, and you know we are battening down the hatches and getting real serious about fantasy hockey. Thank you for tuning in to Wednesday's episode and for making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Don't miss a single chance to get your no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Steele, you know I'm fired up about our partnership with FanDuel, but I'm also fired up for a Wednesday episode where we're going back to the basics a little, doing a little Who Would You Rather between two power forward studs that, again, I don't know if you can go wrong with owning either, but I'm intrigued for your take on that. Tease to the second segment of the show. There's a lot of injury news coming out of teams from across the league, and it's not minor. Svechnikov, Lehkonen, O'Reilly, positive news for the Leafs. We're going to get there as well. Big-time bets, 4-game Wednesday board. I've been on a bit of a heater. I think you're going to like some of my picks, Steele. Why don't we start off with the injuries, though? And I know this player in Svechnikov, this is a guy who you've talked a lot about. He brings a lot of fantasy value. And once again, yesterday, Kaprizov, fantasy GM's going to need to jockey and juggle their roster. Hit me with your take on this and what you would do maybe if you're a Svechnikov owner. I don't know if you are, though. So let you take it away, my friend.
Yeah, you know what? I am a Svechnikov owner, and I actually got offered a trade for Svechnikov and another player the other day, and I actually declined the trade. So kind of didn't work out well for me not accepting that trade. But yeah, this is terrible news for the Carolina Hurricanes and, you know, fantasy owners out there who have Svechnikov on their team and they're trying to make a championship run this year in their fantasy league. But he's out. He's done for the rest of the regular season and for the playoffs. Season-ending surgery on the ACL. I believe it's his left knee. That happened in the loss to the Vegas Golden Knights over the weekend as well. So it's a tough injury. For me personally, I think this is catastrophic. This is detrimental to the Hurricane season and their admiration to try to push for a Stanley Cup this season. Personally, I think Svechnikov is the driving force of this Hurricanes offense. I think he's ahead of Aho. I think he's ahead of Nate Cash, and I think he's ahead of a couple of guys on the blue line as well. I think he's the driving force for this offensive for many, many reasons. He's tied second on points on the Hurricanes so far, first in shots, first in hits. He's a huge threat on the power play. He's a huge threat behind the net because we know he loves to pull off that Michigan. I think he's the biggest force for the Hurricanes, and without him, it's going to be tough because now looking at their daily face or at their lineup right now, and you know things obviously can change and lines can be moved or players can be moved to different lines, but having Jesse Puljujarvi on your first line, that is just an embarrassment going into the first round. You cannot. It's getting dicey. You cannot have Jesse Puljujarvi as your first line left winger heading into the first round. And speaking of the playoffs, they could end up getting taken over for first in the Metropolitan Division. So if that happens, if they move to second in the Metro, maybe even third in the Metro, if possible, and they go up against the New York Rangers in the first round, they're out. They're done. They are not beating the New York Rangers in the first round. So they need to do everything possible in holding on to that first spot in the Metropolitan Division. But even then, if they hold on to it, they get past the first round, they're out in the second. They cannot win the Stanley Cup without Andrei Svechnikov this year.
Steele, this is also just one of the things that we have talked about and people across the NHL know. This Carolina team, if there's one weakness you can poke a hole in, it's the offensive balance and the offensive punch. Max Pacioretty's injury hurts. Sebastian Aho, to me, could be so much better. And I know he's got a pretty good offensive season going, but to me, that's the guy who's also got to pick up the slack here to salvage what's going on. That gap in the Metro Division is now closed. The New Jersey Devils are tied with 94 points. And I think I'm with you, though, like fantasy aside, this is huge for this Carolina team who has really done everything right this year and just not been lucky, I think, with some of these offensive pieces. But what a tough blow for fantasy GMs as well. Svechnikov, Kaprizov, man, these are just tough hurdles to overcome. And we're going to talk about Lehkonen in a second, another important piece. But I think for me, when I look at this Metro Division, that is just now a game changer. All of a sudden, that thing's wide open. And I know the points are the points, and they're going to probably still stay 1, 2, 3 for the most part. I don't know if they can overcome this deal. I'm with you. They just don't have the offensive balance. Martin Necas having one good year. I don't want to put all the responsibility on that guy. But again, let's see what happens. Carolina is defensively stingy and a defense-first team. Maybe they can get through, but he is done for the year, and he is done for the postseason. What about this Artturi Lehkonen situation? Because this was one of those moves late at the deadline last year that literally almost won the Avs the cup. And I know he had a series clincher. Did he have the cup clincher as well?
I think he had a series clincher.
Two, maybe.
Don't know. He might have had two in that Stanley Cup run. So.
This is just another blow to this team. Again, Colorado been banged up all year long. Hit me with your take on this. Artturi Lehkonen, though, very quickly, 4 to 6 weeks with a busted finger, having a good year, 20 goals, 29 assists, career high in both, I believe, and points. Another piece that the Colorado Avalanche are going to have to get by without.
Yeah, obviously it's tough news to be without Artturi Lehkonen for the remainder of the regular season, but they've been through this before the entirety of the season. Like every time you look at the Colorado Avalanche's lineup, they always have 5 guys on the IR. Currently, Gabriel Landeskog, Josh Manson, Eric Johnson, Darren Helm, Francouz, now Lehkonen. They always have 5 guys, it seems like, on the IR. Yeah. So they're used to it at this point. They've been through this the entire season of having multiple stars or great depth players on the IR. But as long as you have Nathan McKinnon, you have Mikko Rantanen, you have Cale Makar playing on your roster, you can get by, especially for the remainder of the season. Obviously they're battling to be top 3 in the Central Division. They're going to be in the playoffs no matter what. So Lehkonen is out 4 to 6 weeks now. I think we can take a look at what you said yesterday or even the last couple of days is keep an eye on Evan Rodriguez. He's on the top line with Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen. I know Mikko Rantanen and Valeri Nichushkin, they've, kind of flip-flop back and forth from the first and second line on the right winger side. So those guys move back and forth. But to fill in Artturi Lehkonen's spot, keep an eye on obviously who goes in there. But Evan Rodriguez is one because he's already on the top line. But take a look at Dennis Malgin. I think he'll definitely get a look on that second line, filling in that spot for Artturi Lehkonen. He's got 3 goals his past 5 games. It could be him. It could be Alex Newhook maybe as well. Could get a look on the left wing side. So keep an eye on Malgin and Alex Newhook for those 2 guys to take the reins over because they're also going to get some power play time as well.
Running out of bodies on this Colorado Avalanche roster,
it seems like
right?
it.
So one of these guys is going to get a good look, and that just might have to be the move you make. Look, in-house, It's the fantasy playoffs, people. I don't know what the format of your league is. Can you still make moves? I assume maybe you might be able to if you can. I don't hate the Malgin angle from Steele here. We're going to talk very quickly after the break about O'Reilly and the impact with the Leafs. It sounds like he's going to be back ahead of the NHL playoffs. We're going to get to the who would you rather between Timo Meier and Zach Hyman, and we're going to get to a mini 4-game Wednesday betting board with our big-time bets. But, we got to talk about our friends from FanDuel because today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the midway point of the NBA season, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then they let you bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Steele and I like going toe-to-toe with these same-game parlays, and we like betting on things like threes hit, twos hit, rebounds, double-double, triple-doubles, and everything in between. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay, so don't miss your chance at a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets. When you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
This is David Harrison from the Locked On Commanders podcast, and this episode is brought to you by US Cellular. At US Cellular, they know phones are great, but they're not always great for us. Sure, they connect us to so much, but they also distract us from, us. The us that actually laughs out loud with each other instead of just texting it, that knows being in the same room doesn't always mean being together. So let's find us again by putting our phones down for 5 days, 5 hours, even 5 minutes. Join US Cellular in the Phones Down for 5 challenge. Find out more at uscellular.com/findus.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on your favorite podcast platforms, including YouTube. So make sure you hit the sub, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love, all the support that our listeners show us out there. And yes, we are pretty much betting on everything, NHL, NBA, NFL, when it comes back into season, even the PGA, baby. I know Flip's making some money over there. We love us some golf on this channel as well. But Flip, we do have big time bets at the end of the episode. We do have who would you rather between two absolute studs. I know you want to talk a little bit about Ryan O'Reilly and the good news that he'll be back before the end of the regular season with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and I think just very quickly, because we like talking about these long shot bets, not even a long shot at the Stanley Cup, a good odd at the Stanley Cup. And that's kind of what I'm looking at this from. Jump on maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs before O'Reilly comes back and starts clicking. The news is out of Elliot Friedman that O'Reilly will be back ahead of the playoffs. So you and I have mentioned a couple times about stashing players that might come in handy at the finals time if you're going to get there. If you have an IR slot, now that you know O'Reilly's coming back, I don't know. Maybe you have a chance, take a chance on O'Reilly. Maybe we'll have a little bit more of a discussion on this over the next couple of days, Steele. But really, my main thing with this is keep an eye on Ryan O'Reilly. And if he does come back, some of those pieces around Toronto, third line, and it just means huge things for playoff time, Steele. That's the main thing. Because I think you and I mentioned he was playing up the middle on the second line, pushing Johnny T over to the wing. I think both you and I can agree he'll be playing that third line center to really balance that out against Tampa Bay. But I don't know. I just think this is going to be a huge add for the Toronto Maple Leafs going up against such a good Tampa Bay team, which are dealing with their own injuries to Steven Stamkos.
Yeah, definitely keeping an eye on Steven Stamkos news. And look, they definitely need Ryan O'Reilly. They could have used him the other night against the Buffalo Sabres. 2 horrific periods to end the night. Second and third period were just awful for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They could have used him then, but very excited to get Ryan O'Reilly back in action before the postseason with the Toronto Maple Leafs and Tampa Bay Lightning, most likely facing off once again. Who would you rather, though? Who would you rather? A former Toronto Maple Leaf player in Zach Hyman or a new Jersey Devils acquisition in Timo Meier? 2 absolute studs. Obviously, Hyman having a career year, but I'll throw it over to you. Who would you rather have, Zach Hyman or Timo Meier?
This is a really tough one, Steele, because usually I think when we do the who would you rathers, it's almost like a win-win, even if you have both. And I understand that this year is a win-win for both. This is how I'm looking at it. The success for Zach Hyman, to me, is tied to the ability to play in the top 6 with 2 of the best players in the NHL. Yeah. And that's why I'm going with him right now. And that might not pan out long-term if the Oilers continue to lose and 1 or 2 of those guys that we know, Draisaitl and McDavid, want to win, jump ship. But for me right now, seeing what Hyman has been able to do in the mix of the top 6, why not do this year in, year out, 70, 80 points? And I know Timo Meier fills out the stats. And I looked at the PIMs, looked at the hits. He basically has Hyman in all those categories. So this is a really hard sell for me. But when you look at who he gets to play with and what they've already done for him this year, why not 80 points next year? Why not 85? And yes, his physicality has come down because he's starting to put the puck in the back of the net a lot more. But I'm going with Zach Hyman connected to the 2 best players in the game offensively. But I think with what's going on in New Jersey, you have a good argument with Timo Meier as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Every time we do these, who would you rather? It's always a win-win situation. You can't go wrong with either guy. There's always going to be one guy ahead of the other, but nonetheless, 2 absolute studs. And I love Zach Hyman. I think he's even going to get to 80 points by the end of this season. There's still 16 games left. He's at 72.
Why not?
But just looking at them both, they're both top 35 in fantasy points this season. Again, you cannot deny Hyman is having a season of a lifetime. He's 30 years old. He's blown his previous career high, 54 points last year, out of the atmosphere. He's got 16 games left. He's at 72 points currently. I absolutely love this player. I have to give him his flowers. I love the way he plays the game. He gives you everything he's got every time he steps on the ice. And with that being said, I got to give him his flowers first, but now I'm going to give them over to Timo Meier as well, because I'm taking Timo Meier. I think, again, like you said, if this is a keeper dynasty league, you're obviously going with Timo Meier because he's 26 years old and Zach Hyman is 30 years old. This is also the first time that we've seen Hyman past 55 points in a season. So obviously playing with McDavid and Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins, it has a lot to do with his success. But I'm going that same direction with Timo Meier. He's 26 years old. He's a consistent 55 to 65 points per season type of player. And we haven't even seen him in his prime yet. He is just getting into his prime.
Good point.
Newly acquired player for the New Jersey Devils, which is a very young team that wants to win right now. We've talked a lot about Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier and Dougie Hamilton and those type of players. And there's a lot of things that you could go based on. Like you said, he's top 5 in shots in the NHL right now. He'll have way over 315 shots by the end of the season. He's, for players, I was trying to do a different angle of different stats here. For players who have over 50 points this season, there's only 5 players that hit more than Timo Meier that have 50-plus points. Brady Tkachuk, Vincent Trocheck, Alex Ovechkin, JT Miller, and Andrei Svechnikov. So only 5 players hit more than Timo Meier, who has 120 hits on the season, by the way. So he hits a lot. He shoots a lot. He's top 35 in fantasy points. He hasn't even gotten into his prime yet. He's playing on a better team now. I think it might take some time to get the chemistry going. But like I said before, I think you look at next year's fantasy draft and Jack Hughes becomes borderline a first-round pick the way he's playing right now.
Agreed.
Borderline first-round pick. And with that being said, because he becomes borderline, I think Timo Meier becomes borderline, mid second round pick to early third round pick, because he's already top 35 in fantasy points. I think those 2 players jump dramatically in next year's fantasy draft. And Timo Meier is going to be the second best player behind Jack Hughes for the Devils next season.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought when I went over this situation was maybe tying him to Jack Hughes and even some of those other guys in the top 6 in the Devils lineup. Nico Hischier, we've talked at length about how their health is a caveat to their fantasy value overall. Yeah. So maybe that also impacts Timo Meier a little bit overall. But that's just me trying to poke holes in what a guy he's a absolute power forward stud who fills out the categories. I guess I'm just a little bit intrigued with what Zach Hyman can do over the next couple of seasons in the mix with who I already mentioned. We don't need to go down that route. That's what I'm sticking to, Steele. And just very quickly, looking at their numbers, And I know Timo Meier has been in the NHL for only 456 games. Zach Hyman only has 30 more games played, and they almost have the same points. 311 for Hyman, 317 for Meier. So Hyman's been able to be productive as well on the offensive side.
Yeah.
So I think I'm up on an uphill battle here with this, but Zach Hyman brings a lot to the table as well. And let's just see what he can do with those disgustingly good players in Edmonton offensively. Next year, if McDavid continues to creep, let's see what Hyman can do as well. But I want to talk about these big-time bets, pal, because I've been on a bit of a heater.
You are on a heater right now. I told you. You told me I was going to jinx you. I'm not. I don't jinx
Appreciate
you. You're the
that.
god.
You're right.
You're the
You were
goat
right.
right now. You're keeping it going right now. So I'm excited to see what your bets are for Wednesday night as well. But before we get there, this episode is also brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious, healthy treat, then you need to get Built Bars right now. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise the taste, then man, oh man, do I have just the thing for you. You got to go and try Built Bars right now. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you, but they're actually the perfect snack. I eat them either before or after the gym. That's when I like to eat them. And what makes Built Bar so good? This is why I have them almost every single day, because they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Who doesn't love chocolate? It's absolutely my favorite, and it should be yours too. They come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond, and so much more. And now you don't even have to wait around to get a box at Built.com. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars from Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. Get some Built Bars and thank me later.
I just learned Discover credit cards do something pretty awesome. At the end of your first year, they automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right, everything you earned doubled. All the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from the trip where you sort of learned how to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope, Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check it out for yourself at discover.com/match.
And thank you guys so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. So hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, flip. Let me catch my breath real quick, because that was a lot real fast.
You're killing it, though.
But big time bets. 4 games on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw it over to the king right now. This is why I'm the rook. This is why I'm the youngin. You show me how it's done. Show everybody how it's done. Let's get out.
I'm going to try, Steele. I'm going to try. And I don't want to, I don't want to throw off the good juju that we've had over the last couple of days, putting up some winners for all the listeners out there. So I hope you all have appreciated those takes. This is a tough 4-game board. That's what I needed to come on and say for today's episode. Looking at the breakdowns, looking at the matchups, Buffalo into Washington, Colorado into Toronto, Minnesota into St. Louis, and the Islanders visiting the Ducks. In my opinion, tough all around. But I have 3 picks that I like. And let me start with this Buffalo-Washington game. And when I looked at one for the total going to the over, this is the one that jumped off the page for me, number 1. 7 of the last 9 meetings between these two have gone over the number. And I just think the Buffalo Sabres had a very big win against the Toronto Maple Leafs just the other night, Monday night. And I think that might open the floodgates a little bit for an offense that clicked all year up until basically the last 2-week stretch where they've struggled. Alex Tuch is back in the mix. That's huge. Craig Anderson seems to be playing with confidence, and you know what that can do for an offensive unit that's been struggling. That's what you sometimes need. And I think this just is a night that both teams get theirs. 4-3 is my final prediction. I'm going to lean Washington, actually, Steele. That's just my take, but it goes over the number for a good odd at -115. That's my first pick of the night.
I was leaning towards the over in that game. It's not part of my 3 picks, but I like that pick a lot because I was going to go that route as well. Again, just an offensive team that's scoring a lot of goals the entire season. So the Sabres, and then you never know what happens with what you're going to get out of the Washington Capitals. Darcy Kemper could put out a shutout or he lets in 5 goals. Nonetheless, I like the over in that game. My first pick, I'm actually taking the Islanders on the puck line. I've been battling back and forth with the money line and puck line. I'm going to take them on the puck line. The last 3 meetings between the Islanders and the Ducks, the Islanders have won all 3, and 2 out of the 3 have gone over the number, and 2 out of the 3 have gone. The Islanders have won by more than 2 goals in that matchup. So Islanders either take them on the money line or the puck line. They've won the last 3 meetings. That's my first pick. Second pick, I'm going to take the Wild on the money line against the St. Louis.
Of course
Blues.
you are.
Now looking, of course, that's my team right there, baby. But look, this is more of a gut feeling than following the trend, because if you're following the trend,
tough board, like I said.
Yeah, you're going with the St. Louis Blues, because the Wild have a 3-5-2 record against the Blues in their last 10 games.
Right.
But these are also 2 different teams right now. The St. Louis Blues have kind of sold off the farm. They picked up guys off waivers, and the Wild are 7-0-3 in their last 10. They're playing great hockey. They're getting great goaltending out of Marc-Andre Fleury and Gustafsson. So 2 different teams right now that are one, even though the record heads up doesn't match. I'm taking the Wild on the money line for my second pick of the night.
Yeah, I think you got to go with just the better team and the team that has played a lot better. This isn't rocket science on that one, Steele. So I'm with you. Again, though, looking at all the matchups, I could almost see a coin flip in every game, except for maybe the Islanders. I would lean as the heavier favorites in that one just because of the track record we've seen. But got to go with the Wild if you're going to bet on that game. I'm staying away from that one. And I am looking to this Islanders matchup, Steele, and I'm looking to a player prop. I said down the stretch, if the New York Islanders were going to get it done without Matt Barzal, Anders Lee was going to have to step up, and he stepped up. 4 goals in his last 5 games, and he just seems to be streaky. He goes quiet, then he goes hot. We've said this as well. So let's just say he gets hot against this Anaheim team, who the Islanders scored 7 goals against earlier this season. Can you get Anders Lee? Anytime goal, you're going to get a good odd for it as well. But I'm feeling Anders Lee anytime goal. And very quickly, Steele, my lock of the night, Colorado at Toronto. This is going to be a good game. And I don't know about you, but to me, this feels like playoff implications. It feels like 2 teams that are aiming to go on runs in this Stanley Cup playoffs. And I just want to take the under. It just feels like the under. It feels like the move between, Samsonov might be in net and he's got something to prove. He hasn't played as good as they expected. The total has gone over the number, though, Steele, in 8 of the last 9 between these 2 teams. Take that with a grain of salt. I expect this to be tight checking. I expect Samsonov to step up and play better. And I think maybe even with that Lehkonen injury weighing over this team a little bit, Steele, considering how good he's been, I can see this being a 3-2 final. I'm going under 6.5. Again, for a good odd, 107. My lock of the night, Steele. This is a tough board, though. I keep saying that because it's true.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a tough pick. Obviously, with the trend you just said, 8 out of the last 9 going over the number. I'm looking at the last 2 matchups.
It's a gut pick again.
That's a gut. Hey, sometimes you got to go with your gut feeling. But the Avalanche just won 8-4 against the Montreal Canadiens. The Leafs let a game slide. They lost 4-3. Those 2 games go over the number. So I'm staying away from that one. But my lock of the night also comes from this game. My lock of the night, Mikko Rantanen, anytime assist for the lock of the night.
I like it.
4 assists his last 3 games. Look, I didn't know which one I want, either anytime goal or anytime assist. I might even go over 1.5 points, but Mikko Rantanen, 4 assists the last 3 games. He also has 2 goals in the last 3 games as well. So he's getting points right now, but I'm going to go with the anytime assist. That's my lock of the night because he's just firing on all cylinders this year.
Love it. And why not? This could be one of those situations, too, where these 2 teams' top guns go toe-to-toe just because that's what seemingly happens when the Toronto Maple Leafs play good teams. They seem to shrink away against the bad teams and play really well against those good ones. So maybe that's one of those situations that brings out the best in both teams' top 6. But it's going to be probably the game to watch Wednesday night.
Yeah, as long as the Toronto Maple Leafs win, I am happy. Toronto Maple Leafs and the Minnesota Wild, those 2 teams, they got to win. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, though, check out Game to Game, every moment, every performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On hosts can deliver. Thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today. Did you watch every NHL game last night? Of course not. That's impossible. So Locked On brings you Locked On Game to Game NHL. With Locked On Game to Game NHL, we take you inside every arena to every game and give you the Locked On local experts insight. And by the end, it's as though you were at every game. Find Locked On Game to Game NHL on the Locked On NHL feed and follow today. Locked On Game to Game NHL, taking you to every arena for every game with the local experts. Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.